Hello, I'm here today with Patricia Raufer. She's an innovation strategy executive who's led amazingly fascinating transformation initiatives in a range of industries, everything from payments, digital media, and in the travel industry. She's got a diverse background that includes marketing and technical roles in creating new products and services. At the core, though, she's really just passionate about making things real, from a digital product to a fine craft project to a watercolor painting or a design. Her approach is holistic, and in her third act, she applies systems thinking that she's used as a pioneer. She's an adjunct professor and a creator and a maker. So Patricia, I'm so happy to have you here today with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
So Patricia is going to be one of the inspiring storytellers that will share a story about decisions and or moments of transition and realization in their lives that have allowed them to connect the dots and find a path to a meaningful and joyful way of living in her third act. So today I wanted to just introduce you to Patricia and get her to share a little bit about her life. And I will start, Patricia, with a question. And that is that across our lives, in particular, after living for 50 years on this planet, there are times where we sort of start to, as I mentioned, connect the dots and realize what it is that makes our hearts beat faster and what it is that we want to do with our lives. So tell me a little bit about the way you've lived your career and now how that's led you to your third act.
So I have been lucky in that I've been able to have aha moments over the course of my entire career. And those aha moments have led me to make an unusual career path. And most recently, I realized that the idea of the ahas and following the ahas are important, but I had learned a lot of lessons along the way. And there was an incident that happened specifically that I felt really led me to think personally as to what is it that I really wanted to do and how could I make sure that I incorporate all of the aspects of myself into my work and to be creating the new, but be including all of who I am in that creativity. And so that's really what my story is about, is creating the new, but having the courage to put myself out there.
Well, let's talk about courage. So for many people in different times of life, when a transition is afoot or when they're frustrated with something or want to try something new, fear can hold us back. And so to what do you believe is at the heart of the courage that you've had to follow your heart or that new idea that you're curious about?
Well, I think it was that I didn't really think that things could go wrong, really. Like, what could possibly go wrong? And maybe it was that I was always making things up, even when I was a kid. Like, I was making up how I was gonna create clothing, or what I was gonna do with creating crafts or whatnot. And so I was always making things. And so when I was looking at my work, there was sort of an element of the making things there as well. And the being fearless, I think, I guess it's from having come from a very, very large family, that there was a way in which I felt that whatever I did, I would have to figure out how to do it on my own anyway. And so this was just another example of it. Like, okay, well, go do that. And so I didn't really have an orientation to thinking that there was something that I couldn't do, because I'd always figured out how to do it. So I just had this orientation that I could do it. So why
That's
would it
beautiful.
not work?
Well, so yeah, so it's like a curiosity blended with this sort of track record of figuring it out. Everything's figure outable, somebody said, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, why would
Well,
it not work? Of course.
well, but so many people, though, unlike you, it sounds like, do get confined or held back and feel stuck by some sort of external disapproval or external expectation of a parent. So it sounds like, though, you had a large family, you had a family that supported your dreams in a way, right? Did you? Or I'm just
Well,
curious.
well, it was kind of, yeah. I mean, I had a father that was an engineer and a mother that was an artist. And so there was
Mm.
a way in which it was just kind of like, okay, well, this is what you're doing. And I honestly initially didn't really know what to do. And so when I went to school, I picked a degree in economics because that seemed logical. And I thought, well, why not? I wasn't really thinking about, oh, I'm going to set the world on fire. It was more like, well, this is something that I happen to like. And it turns out that it was the right choice for me because at the end of the day, economics is basically about systems. And so I came across it just because I just happened to come across it. And then that had an impact on me in the way that it informed the way that I think. And so but it wasn't, there's a way in which it wasn't really intentional. It was really more that I sought out things that would be of interest to me. And then because it was of interest, then it led to other things that were of interest. I also ended up early in my career working for the airlines because I figured that if I was going to travel as much as I wanted to travel, then somebody else was going to have to pay for it. It wasn't going to be me. And so I ended up getting a job in the airlines for that reason as well. And that led me to airline reservation systems and systems. So it's always kind of this thread of systems.
Well, the genetics behind your brain style and your flexibility is, an engineer dad and an artist mother. So I am fascinated by that because so many people tend to put themselves in a box. You don't put yourself in any box, it sounds like.
No, and it was kind of it was just sort of the water I swam in. Like that was just how it was. And my other siblings have equally interesting backgrounds as well, but it was just that's kind of what was expected. You just figure it out and go do it. So everything is figure outable.
I love it. Well, so talk to me about this because, as we look at how you're spending your time now, at the culmination of just so many fascinating experiences with, a variety of companies, we resonate around the digital media world, you with Prodigy, me with America Online. But one of the stories you told me earlier was about, as a young woman, being very interested in being a fashion designer. And I think you even told me that you made your own clothes as a corporate woman in time. So so that to me is fascinating in itself, but that seems to have led you to create this beautiful tapestry of the life you now live. So tell me a little bit about, how you got there, but also what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I was always making things, and I honestly started sewing, and I got a lot of accolades for the things I created because sewing allowed me to be both creative and precise. And so, to be a perfectionist, you can be a perfectionist, and it's okay to be a perfectionist in something that you're creating for yourself. And so that's where the clothing came in, and basically, I really enjoyed it, and I got a kick out of being able to get exactly what I wanted, be it the color, the texture, the design, whatever. So that really worked for me. And I just did it while I was, I kind of did it on the side while I was working. And, it was just one of those things that I really liked to do. So it was a hobby, and it was a hobby that had a benefit to it. So ultimately, I learned about fine craft and being able to create things. But when you're creating like that, then you have a vision of what it is that you want to create, and you figure out what the vision is, and then what are the steps that you're going to take to get to that vision. And so I early in my career, after I had finished with economics, I was like, well, what do I do with this? And I thought, well, I would know that I want to travel, but in the meantime, maybe I could be a fashion designer because that happens to be something that I like to do. But then I realized that I didn't really have the courage to put my work out there
Mm,
and to have people make comments about it. And I didn't have the heart for it. And I thought, well,
mm,
I'm not going to do that. So I ended up instead choosing digital and digital media, and ultimately created significant digital products through my work in launching the proof of concept for travel that became Travelocity for Sabre, and then
wow.
becoming the working at Prodigy and creating online campaigns, website campaigns, which since you were at AOL, you know that there's
Yes.
words for that stuff. And while I was at Prodigy though, however, I had AOL as my client, and I realized that there was a lot going to be happening with the digital marketplace. And in my work at TWA, I had done some online marketing campaigns. My work at Prodigy, more online marketing campaigns, and ultimately decided mid-career to get my MBA at USC because I was choosing an MBA that had a concentration in organizational effectiveness, and at the same time, I had read a book by Peter Senge called The Fifth Discipline. And the fifth discipline talks about systems thinking
Mm,
and basically being able to think of things holistically and seeing how they interact with each other, which is not too different than studying economics, which is not different at all than studying digital or doing something with digital, because digital is all about that interconnection and the systemic thinking. And then that's not too different from creating address. It's all structure and then breaking it down and then executing.
I
So
love the way you marry that. And that's one of the things that I want to focus on too, just a little bit is, so there at this stage in our lives, we see the end zone, we feel the momentous nature of each day and of each moment in a way that we didn't when we were in our 20s and 30s. So somewhere along the way, you have now, tell me how you've not unearthed, but really honored and put your design, your craft as a more active part of your life in conjunction with also teaching systems thinking.
so basically, I have always been I've always been somebody who has a lot of interest. And so what this has allowed me to do is I actually had an incident that happened that made me really think about, if not now, when. And so we'll be able to talk about that in greater detail at a later date. But but basically the impact has been that I tend to think now holistically. And before, when I was studying the systems thinking, I was thinking that it was really, this is quite an amazing thing, and recognized it from a digital perspective that something was going to happen with the digital marketplace. And now it's full circle 30 years later. And for me to be able to speak about systems thinking to students and to have them take systems thinking and apply the concepts of digital into a framework that could be applied for solving problems like global warming, the circular economy, or food disparities, right? So there's ways in which I learned things from being in the digital marketplace and creating digital product that applies to thinking holistically. And once you think holistically, you can't go back. It's kind of like that's part of how I do things. So the holistic thinking actually started at a pretty young age when I was making things, making dresses and whatnot, but carried all the way through. What has happened lately is that I've gotten more of the courage to be focusing
Mm.
on those things which are not technical and digital, and instead on art and design. And so I actually have started doing watercolors and actually just sold my first watercolor. And
Oh,
that's,
fantastic.
yeah, so that was like, I was thrilled with that. And that feeling of selling a watercolor that I was very proud of, that feeling is no different in some ways than when I create a big, 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 large scale project. It's, to me, it's like in some ways more of a thrill because it's more personal, and it's more of a, it's more of a challenge because it's not something that I've known how to do from a number of years in a practice. This is a new practice for me, but if not now, when? I had to learn how to come to that term.
Absolutely. They've been in you all along, but you're honoring it more at the forefront, with this, more of, as we settle in to understand who we are, and not fear the judgment that we might have feared when we were younger. It's so beautiful. So I cannot wait for you to share your story in October in a little bit more detail, so people understand how this journey has worked and the why it has. So one of the things I'd just like to ask you as we sign off is a question I ask each of the storytellers is, so if I were to come to you and say, please design either a plaque or a bumper sticker that you might share in the world that completely resonates with you and your philosophy of how you live your life, what would that be?
So I I love the bumper sticker or the concept, something that's small to be succinct. And I think that Oscar Wilde said it best, which is be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. And I just kind of remind myself that on a regular basis, that, that I like sometimes when I don't have courage, I'm like, okay, like get yourself together. Like that's what you have to do for yourself. Like, so that concept is really something that it's just a reminder, because everybody has times when they're wanting things to be different, or they're a little bit afraid to put something out there, and that really helps me.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And so many times we wear masks for a lot of our middle lives, either as in the roles we have because we want to fit in, or
Yep.
we want to
Yep.
be as the world expects us to be. So this freedom, I mean, that to me is what I would say. It's like a freedom to say, I am who I am. You like me, you respect me, maybe not. It doesn't matter to me because I am who I am. And it's a great sense of freedom. It really
That
is.
it is. That it is. I agree.
Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure as always to talk to you, and we'll see you very soon.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for this opportunity.